Today, I want to start by highlighting some good news. Last night, Health Canada announced that it has authorized the first serological test for COVID-19 antibodies. This is a critical step for the work of the COVID-19 Immunity Task Force, which now has a safe and approved test that can detect antibodies specific to COVID-19 in an individual's blood. These tests will help us better understand immunity against the virus and how it spreads, so we can keep Canadians safe and healthy.
Last evening, Health Canada announced that it has now authorized a first serological test to detect COVID-19 antibodies. This is a crucial step forward for the COVID-19 Immunity Task Force that now has a safe and approved test that will make it possible to detect the presence of specific COVID-19 antibodies in people's blood. This is an important step when it comes to better understanding immunity against the virus and the way the virus spreads. That will help us to ensure the health and safety of Canadians.
I now want to turn to what we're doing to help employers keep their employees. Over the past few weeks, our government has unveiled a number of measures to help businesses stay afloat during the crisis. We want to make sure that as many Canadians as possible can keep getting their paycheck now and have a job to come back to once the pandemic is behind us. Because that day will come, and when it does, Canada needs to be ready. Our government has been laying the groundwork for our economic recovery, and we know that key to our collective success is maintaining the connection between employer and employee. So, to help businesses of all sizes keep people on the payroll, we launched the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. We also introduced the Canada Emergency Business Account to support those struggling with cash flow. These measures are making a real difference in people's lives. So far, more than 500,000 small businesses have received a loan through the CEBA, and over 120,000 employers have been approved to receive the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy for almost 2 million workers. We also announced more targeted support for regional businesses, including those operating in the tourism sector and seasonal industries. We created a nearly $1 billion Regional Relief and Recovery Fund to ensure that they're also getting the support they need during this time. The funding will flow through the 6 regional development agencies, with a portion dedicated to the Community Futures Network to assist businesses in rural and remote regions. Today, we're releasing more details on how that money will be split between the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, Canada Economic Development for Quebec regions, FedDev Ontario, FedNor, Western Economic Diversification Canada, and CanNor. And here's the bottom line. These organizations understand the economic realities and specific challenges facing both your region and your business. They can help you with your most pressing needs, whether it's covering costs or keeping your employees. So if you're struggling but did not qualify for other programs like the wage subsidy or the emergency business account, give them a call. They're there for you.
A few weeks ago, we created the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund with an envelope of almost $1 billion to help small employers in rural areas or those working in the tourism or seasonal industries. The money will flow through our 6 regional development agencies. Part of the funding will also be dedicated to the Community Futures Network to support businesses in rural or remote regions. Today, we are providing more details regarding the distribution of the funds between the various regions. Whether it is FedDev Ontario, DEC, or the Community Futures Network, these entities understand the economic realities and the specific challenges facing your region and your business. They can help you to respond to your most urgent needs, whether it's problems with liquidity or your inability to keep your employees. So give them a call. They're there for you.
From the outset, our government has been focused on getting people the help they need as quickly as possible. We announced support not just for businesses and their employees, but for different groups of people who've been hit especially hard by the pandemic. A few weeks ago, we launched the Canada Emergency Student Benefit as part of our $9 billion plan to help young people get through the next few months. And today, I can confirm that students and recent graduates will be able to apply for this benefit starting Friday. To prepare for that, if you haven't already signed up for the My Account on the CRA website, it's worth doing this now to make the next steps go even quicker. I
also have some news for students and recent graduates this morning. Starting on Friday, you can apply to receive the Canada Emergency Student Benefit. This new benefit is part of our $9 billion plan to help you get through this pandemic. Because of COVID-19, there are not as many jobs for students this summer, and you need to work during the next few months in order to pay your tuition or your daily expenses for the year to come. The Canada Emergency Student Benefit will be there to help you. You can apply starting on Friday, but in the meantime, do go to the CRA website to register under My Account if you haven't done so already. That will accelerate things even more. I want to close this morning by reminding everyone to continue to follow the recommendations of our public health experts. We are hearing a lot about the gradual reopening of the economy these days, and I know we're all anxious to see that happen, but we must remain vigilant. So continue to stay home as much as possible, and don't forget to keep a safe distance when you go out. And together, we will get through this.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Premier ministre. On va commencer la période de questions par le téléphone aujourd'hui. Opérateur, première question.
Thank you. Merci. Première question, Michel Lamarche, TVA.
Monsieur Trudeau, vous parliez de la réouverture de
you have talked about the reopening of the economy. That is starting now. But in terms of non-medical masks, would you be prepared to issue a recommendation or an order to all Canadians that they should wear a mask when they leave home? Well, we are clearly seeing that various regions have different realities. Prince Edward Island, for example, is looking at a very different situation from Ontario. So we have to allow local and provincial authorities to determine which principles should guide their decisions about citizens. But as we all know, the best way to protect ourselves is to stay home as much as possible, and if we must go out, to keep a distance of 2 meters from other people. Wearing a mask, according to experts, can help, but it cannot replace the social distancing that we should be practicing as a priority. Follow-up? Yes, we saw you last week during the ceremony in Trenton. You kept your distance and you were also wearing a mask. Why did you do that? And I'd like you to comment on the border. Are the Americans resisting the desire to keep the border closed? Well, with respect to the Trenton ceremony, that was the request of the Canadian Armed Forces that everyone wear a mask at all times, and this is a recommendation that we all followed. Now, with respect to the United States, the constructive discussions are continuing with the U.S. administration, and I can tell you that so far that partnership and that collaboration have been excellent, and I see no reason why it should not continue to be so.
I can highlight that since the very beginning of this pandemic, the communications and the collaboration with our American partners has been exceptional. Conversations are ongoing all the time on a range of measures, including border measures. And I can tell you that up until now, the collaboration has been exceptional, and I see no reason for that to change.
Merci. Opérateur, prochaine question.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, David Lundgren, Reuters. Line open.
Good morning, Prime Minister. On the border, we understand that the two sides are going to agree to keep the restrictions in place until June 21st. But what happens in future if you decide the border should be shut and the Americans decide it should be open? Will you go ahead and keep it shut even though your biggest trading partner is urging you to open up?
Right now, we're making decisions for right now. Obviously, there are reflections on what next steps could be and might be in different situations and different progressions of COVID-19. But every step of the way in this unprecedented situation, we're reacting to and responding to the realities we see now, and that's where we will stay focused. We're focused on keeping Canadians safe every step of the way, and we'll take the necessary decisions at every different step.
As a follow-up?
Secondly, Norway's sovereign fund, which is the largest of its kind in the world, is blacklisting 4 Canadian oil sands firms. What's your reaction to this? And doesn't this suggest that the major oil sands producers have a lot more work to do for you to consider that they're aligning with federal climate goals?
We've seen investors around the world looking at the risks associated with climate change as an integral part of investment decisions they make. That is why it is so important for Canada to continue to move forward on fighting climate change and reduce our emissions in all sectors. And I can highlight that many companies in the energy sector have understood that the investment climate is shifting and there is a need for clear leadership and clear targets to reach on fighting climate change to draw on global capital.
Thank you. Operator, next question.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Ryan Timilty, National Post. Line open.
Yeah, good morning, Prime Minister. Yesterday, the Toronto Transit Commission came out and painted sort of a really dire financial picture for the next couple of months, and it's dealing with the same sort of, other transit agencies across the country are dealing with the same sort of financial picture. I'm wondering if you think the federal government will have a role in helping to deal with that, especially if it could mean big service cuts or potentially these transit systems not operating.
I think we recognize we're in a very, very difficult situation right now where we have asked Canadians to cease a massive part of the economic activity that keeps this country going. We've done this for the very important and clear reason of protecting Canadians' lives, because we know that protecting the health and safety of Canadians is necessary for us to move forward with a strong country economically or otherwise. That's why the decisions we've taken to keep Canadians safe need to come first. At the same time, we are looking at careful reopenings in gradual ways in different parts of the country, and the federal government will be there to support the provinces and other organizations and industries as we look to doing it the right way in a way that keeps Canadians safe. There are going to be a lot of very important and difficult decisions and delicate balances to strike over the coming weeks and months, and we will continue to be there to work with all partners to make sure that Canada is getting it right for Canadians.
As a follow-up, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm sorry, sir, but on transit systems specifically, like the Toronto Transit Commission, like OC Transpo, that are struggling with their revenues, do you think the federal government will play a role, or do you think that's a provincial responsibility?
Well, as we know, operation of transit systems is a provincial and municipal responsibility. As a federal government, however, we have made significant investments in upgrading and strengthening transit systems across the country, because we know it's such a key part of both prosperity and moving forward in ways that make life affordable and fighting climate change at the same time for Canadians. So we will be there to listen to concerns that Canadians are expressing and that different orders of governments are expressing on making sure that our reopening is successful. We know that public transit and getting people to work is going to be an important part of our economy moving forward, but we also know that the challenges posed by social distancing and much greater working from home has come and affected our transit system significantly. So we're going to have to adjust, and the federal government will be there to work with the provinces, including supporting them in their areas of jurisdiction in many cases. Nous savons que le transport collectif
We know
est
that
important pour notre économie.
urban transit and transit services are very important for this country's recovery. And there are real challenges there because of physical distancing. Of course, there are also a lot of people working from home now. So our transit systems are receiving less revenues. And we will be there to support the provinces and municipalities if necessary. But we also understand that operating transit systems is a provincial responsibility, not a federal responsibility. And as I said, we will be there to help because we need Canada to reopen and we want that to be safe and gradual.
Merci, opérateur. Dernière question au téléphone.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Lina Dib, La Presse canadienne. À vous.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur
Good morning,
Trudeau.
Mr.
J'aimerais qu'on
Trudeau.
revienne sur les
I'd like us to
CHEK.
come
Vous
back
avez dit
to
hier
seniors'
que vous
homes.
êtes prêt
You
à
said
aider les
yesterday
provinces
that
à
you were
relever les
prepared to
défis.
help
Vous
the
êtes en même temps,
provinces
vous allez
meet their
pas piétiner les
challenges.
compétences des provinces en matière de
But
santé.
this is not a federal area of jurisdiction, so how are you going to help them meet those challenges? Are we just talking about transferring money to them? Well, as I've said from the outset, there will need to be conversations between the different levels of government and among Canadians in terms of finding ways to ensure that our seniors are not extremely vulnerable as they are now. The federal government will be there to help, and this is a federal commitment we made when we send in the armed forces to seniors' homes, but of course we did that in partnership with the province. And we will continue to work with all the provinces in a positive spirit of collaboration to ensure that we are doing the right things for Canadians. Follow up? Yes, but I suppose that you do not intend to leave the army there over the long term. So in terms of your discussions on these long-term care homes, what are you thinking of? Sending them more money? And could you explain, since the problem is now, why not look at it right now and resolve the problem right now rather than waiting until we've finished counting dead bodies? Well, I think we all see that we're in an extreme and urgent situation at this time, and we have to take all the necessary steps right now to help in these long-term care facilities, and that's what we're doing. That's what we're focused on at this time. But as well, in the months and years to come, we will have to look closely at the status of our seniors across the country and improve and enhance the systems that support them. The federal government will have its part to play in that, but of course we do intend to respect the fact that this is provincial jurisdiction.
In regard to the border, your chief medical officer yesterday said Americans pose a risk to us. So I wanted to know, when was the last time you talked to President Trump about the border, and what pressure is the U.S. putting on Canada to reopen?
I think every country recognizes that as we control our domestic situation, we are vulnerable to international travelers. Different countries are facing different challenges, and as we manage the spread of COVID-19, we will want to make sure that we're not becoming vulnerable from travelers arriving elsewhere. That's why we made strong moves to close our borders, including to American travelers at this time. As we move forward, we will continue to work with the administration, and I can highlight that the work with the American administration continues to be constructive and positive. I have spoken with President Trump a number of times over the past weeks, and our conversations have always been very positive. Okay.
I think that we all recognize that as we protect Canadians within the country through measures that will help to stop the spread of COVID-19, we remain vulnerably to COVID-19 cases that could come in from outside the country. And that's why we are trying to put in extreme restrictions on travel from outside the country, including the United States. We are pursuing our very positive collaboration with the U.S. administration. I've spoken several times to President Trump in recent weeks, and those discussions have always been very positive.
This is exactly 2 months since you've started giving these updates. I know Canadians appreciate that. But for obvious reasons, we don't have a budget right now. The PBO says the deficit could reach $1 trillion by the end of the year. How much longer will Canadians have to wait to get a financial picture here of how much all of this is costing us?
I think Canadians rightly expect us to be focused on the immediate and getting things settled so that Canadians can actually feel safe and look at careful reopening. But at the same time, we have been transparent every step of the way about the investments we're making, and we will have, of course, we will continue to share with Canadians our outlook for the future. We recognize, however, that the situation is changing incredibly rapidly, and a budget is usually something that projects what's going to happen in the Canadian economy for the next 12 months. And right now we're having a lot of difficulty establishing with any certainty what's going to happen in the next 12 weeks. We will continue working on this. We will continue to be open and transparent with Canadians as much as possible, but we will stay focused on helping people in the immediate as we move towards a better future. We
know that we're dealing with an unprecedented situation where things change very quickly. A budget or an economic update normally sets out what we can expect in the next 12 months. And right now it's a real challenge to even know what's going to happen in the next few weeks. So we will continue to be open and transparent. We will talk about our projections and our expectations for the coming months, but at the same time, we want to remain focused on what must be done right now to ensure that we can have the best possible future ahead of us.
Good morning, Prime Minister. David Aiken, Global News. Just to come back to Molly's issue about the border, federal agencies have to plan to maintain the current U.S.-Canada border agencies. Municipalities on the border have to make some plans about this. Can you sort of give them some assurance today that the U.S.-Canada border restrictions will stay where they are until the end of June?
We are a good week away from the expiry of the current phase of our border restrictions with the United States. Conversations are ongoing, are constructive or productive. I won't make any announcements today, but I can say that things are going well, and we're confident about being able to continue to keep Canadians safe.
And to come back again on Molly's question about fiscal updates and budgets, when we went through this, the crisis in 08-09, we had multiple fiscal updates. We've had lots of years where we've had multiple budgets because of elections or whatever, and it's really hard to understand why you couldn't have a budget now and update that budget in 3 months or even a month if you needed to. Why not a budget, or at the very least a fiscal update with the promise to update it in a couple of months?
Again, we have been focused very much on responding to this unprecedented situation by getting money into the pockets of Canadians, of workers, of families who need it right across the country. Unlike previous recessions or economic downturns, this is a situation that has no antecedents. It is a completely outside health issue that has caused us to choose to cease a massive amount of economic activity in this country to keep Canadians safe. We continue to work every day on supporting Canadians. We continue to be absolutely transparent about the measures we're putting forward for Canadians, and we will continue to look for ways to keep people apprised on what we expect for the coming months. But as we say, things are changing extremely quickly, and we want to make sure we're putting our efforts where they are most useful, which is both sharing with Canadians everything we're doing as we're doing it, and staying focused on what we need to do right now.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Tonda McCharles, Toronto Star. This week, medical research institutes across the country will begin to lay off 10,000 to 15,000 people who work on health research because they can't get the support of the federal government. They don't qualify for your wage subsidy program. And that's going to have a cascade effect even on the COVID research that's happening because these research institutes provide the infrastructure that supports that. So can you explain to me why it's not a priority to keep those critical employees employees tethered to their employer?
On the contrary, Tonda, we have made significant investments in the hundreds of millions of dollars into science and research across Canada. We know that this is a crisis that is science-based. It's caused by a medical challenge of COVID-19, and we need to use science to get ourselves through this. That is why our investments in science, our investments in supporting graduate students, our investments in supporting research institutes have been significant and will continue. So I will follow up and look into this issue you're bringing up, but our focus is on making sure that scientists get the support they need right across the country, and we will continue to do that.
Thank you.
Hi, Prime Minister. Tom Perry with CBC. Ontario says it's going to wrap up testing at long-term care facilities in the next couple of days. Quebec is nowhere near that. You're a Quebecer, you're a Quebec MP. Can I ask you, why do you think the province is having such a hard time with this? And is there anything more you can do to help?
The responsibility of the federal government is to support the provinces in delivering their plans for things like testing, for things like PPE, their plans for reopening. We are there to work with the provinces to ensure they have the equipment and the capabilities they need, whether it's been procuring swabs for testing kits around the country, whether it's moving forward on domestic production of the reagent necessary for producing results from those tests. The federal government has been extremely active, and we will continue to be there to respond to the provinces and their plans and their needs for more testing. It's something that we know is an essential part of how we move forward on a careful reopening. The role of
the federal government is to be there to support the provinces to execute their plan, whether it means providing and procuring the equipment they need to do the testing, or bringing in the chemicals that are needed to analyze the results. The federal government has taken many, many steps to be there and support the provinces with their plan. But when it comes to testing, those issues are determined by the province, and the federal government will be there to provide its support, and we will continue to be there for them.
Steve Chase, Globe and Mail. Mr. Prime Minister, your ambassador to China, Dominic Barton, told a group of Canadians last week that China, because of its conduct, is alienating foreign countries and injuring its goodwill abroad. As Mr. Barton put it in foreign policy jargon, China is accumulating negative soft power around the world. That is, it's undermining its international influence and the ability to persuade other countries to see things Beijing's way. Now, you hired Mr. Barton because of his expertise in China. So the question for you is, do you agree with his assessment?
I think it's clear that there are many questions for countries around the origins and behavior in early days on the COVID-19 situation, particularly questions for China that we've called on to need to be asked in the coming months so we can get answers. At the same time, we're seeing a global pandemic that requires a global coordinated response, and how countries are behaving now towards each other, supporting each other, moving forward in a difficult time is being noticed by everyone. And I think it's totally normal that we be asking questions about how different countries are behaving, including China. Okay. Depuis les débuts,
from the very beginning, we have known that there would be difficult questions to put to a number of countries, including China, regarding the origin and the beginnings of this virus and how it turned global. At the same time, we know that a global pandemic means that there need to be global answers, and the different countries have to collaborate and work together to come through this. And of course, the countries out there who are not behaving as they should will be receiving questions, and people will be drawing conclusions about the way they behaved. Louis Blouin, Radio-Canada. With respect to China again, in recent weeks you've been very, very cautious. Every time there's talk of China and you're asked to comment on Australia's idea to conduct an inquiry. Why is that? Are you afraid that this will have an impact on medical supplies from China, or do you think that you will suffer reprisals. Well, I can tell you that my responsibility now and at all times is to ensure the welfare and safety of all Canadians. That is my major concern in this pandemic, and we must work with everyone to secure the necessary equipment and to establish the necessary partnerships that will allow us to come through this. Yes, we will all have questions that need to be answered in the coming weeks as to how some countries behaved, including China. But my responsibility at every step of the way is to make sure that I'm doing everything possible to protect and support Canadians during this crisis, and that's what I intend to do.
My responsibility, first and foremost as Prime Minister, is to look out for Canadians, to make sure we're keeping Canadians safe and healthy and whole as much as possible in good times and in times of crisis. That's why, even though, of course, we will have very strong questions to ask of many different countries through how this pandemic began and propagated around the world, my focus needs to be on ensuring that we're getting the support necessary for Canadians every step of the way, in terms of PPE, in terms of testing capacities, in terms of partnerships towards getting treatments and vaccines for this. My focus needs to be on keeping Canadians safe, and that's where it will stay.
Merci beaucoup. C'est ce qui m'a fait la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui.
Merci tout le monde.
All right, that is the Prime Minister of Canada.